What is anger? Vindictive attitude towards others, towards frustration, towards sources of frustration. And it forms the basis for fault finding. The person who's angry can never find a moment of peace. And by vindictive attitude, it implies that there is an element of hatred in that. But there's a difference between hatred and anger. Hatred is you have the intention to inflict harm, to really harm other people. But being angry doesn't mean that you want to inflict harm onto other people. For example, let's say you're very attached to your iPhone, and everywhere you go, you just keep texting. Then you find yourself that you fall into a pool of water and you're all wet. You get angry, but there's no hatred in that. The average person encounters more anger than hatred. Paradoxically, anger is directed more towards our nearest and our dearest ones. Right? We spend a lot of time with our families, with our friends. Although we call those people our friends, our families, our nearest, our dearest, but we direct our anger towards them. Let's say you depend on your parents to drive you to school. If your parent comes late to pick you up, you get angry. Although your parent has shown you love, but yet you can show anger to your family. So the closer you are to somebody, the easier you are to showing your anger. Not necessarily a bad thing too, because another way of looking at it is you would not normally show your anger to a stranger because you don't know that person. Only when you are comfortable enough, you can show your true emotions, how you feel, because you feel comfortable enough in that situation. And that's a good thing when you're being truthful. But if we don't control it, we're not disciplined enough, we can overdo it and we can get angry. We can take advantage of that trust. We take advantage of that comfort in that relationship and become abusive by being angry all the time. And so that's a good and bad in it. We have to know how to balance it. So anger here is, there's no hatred in it, but it's just an explosive release of energy. A person who is not allowing himself to be angry, does not feel his anger, is isolating himself from that energy. And eventually that energy will be explosive. We should feel integrated with that energy, otherwise become isolated. And it becomes explosive, we can alienate ourselves from others. One is internal alienation, where you're not integrated with your own energy, where you don't accept your anger, you're not acknowledging that you're being angry and you've lost control. That's internal isolation. And then there's external isolation is where you become explosive and now you are alienating yourself from other people because people don't want to deal with your explosive energy. Right? So it's very important to be able to recognize our own energy and be comfortable with how we feel. Anger has no limits. Anger can be directed towards loved ones, to our own enemy, and things that have nothing to do with us. People get angry because it's too hot. The weather is too cold. So people get angry, there's no limit. We get angry with whatever that frustrates us. For example, you're a stranger, even though you don't know that person, but you still get angry at that person. For example, you're driving on a freeway and a person cuts right in front of you. You don't even know how that person looks like, but you get angry at that person. And so anger has no limits. But for some people, experiencing their own anger is a step forward because it allows them to feel integrated. It allows them to acknowledge their own weaknesses. But that doesn't mean that we should experience anger all the time. We should not use it as an excuse to be angry, because over the long term, anger is not compatible with metta, loving kindness. Even though it is necessary to acknowledge, to have a sense of our own feelings, to be comfortable, but we should recognize that being angry is something that is unskillful. That will not lead to good karmic results. And the more that we repress our own emotions, the more isolated we become internally and externally. So although we should be truthful with our feelings, but we should be aware of the consequences, and we should try our best to neutralize that negative mental state. And why do people get angry? It has very much to do with egotism, our own ego. When we feel hurt, we get angry. For example, you're in a conversation and somebody says something very hurtful. If your ego is big and you say, how dare he's calling me a fool? How dare he's calling me that? And so when you care too much about other people's opinions, then your ego is inflated and you can be hurt easily. But you were to say, well, he's done a foolish thing and in the end it is his own problem, then you don't feel as hurt because your ego is not big. The more you expose yourself, the more easier of a target you become. And so when we are attached to our car, that's where our ego is. And so somebody who scratches our car, we feel hurt. But if somebody attaches your neighbor's car, you don't care about, you don't feel hurt. You will like the shirt too much, and somebody criticizes your shirt, you feel hurt. Or if somebody compliments your shirt, you feel elated. And so whatever that we are attached to, that's what our ego is associated with. And so the more that we attach our focus, the bigger our ego is, and the more likely that we'll get hurt. People feel that there is a sense of righteousness in being angry. Let's say you're in an argument and you tell your friend, hey, calm down, just let it go. No, it's not worth it, don't be yelling, let it go. But then your friend says, no, I cannot let it go. I have to teach that person a lesson. I have to be angry to show them what's wrong, what's right. Even he may be right, but by showing his anger, he feels the righteousness in that. And sometimes there's satisfaction behind it. Right? When we're angry, we want to show our anger. We want to inflict pain. And if the more that person suffers, the happier that we feel. But if we tease people, we want to insult them, but they don't respond, then we don't feel the satisfaction. Some people stay together in a relationship to satisfy the anger. They are not compatible. They have conflicts all the time. They stay together. They hurt each other, but they continue to stay together to satisfy the anger. Everybody in this world, right, we all want to avoid pain and seek joy. So that's natural. But in some cases, angry people like to go where suffering is. As opposed to detaching themselves from the source of suffering, they continue to hold on to that suffering. They continue to become attached to that suffering to satisfy the anger. And so that's delusion. That's why anger can lead to delusion as well. And so that's why anger is not compatible with metta, loving kindness. That's why anger is poison, because it leads to suffering. Greed versus anger. Greed tends to find life more pleasant, especially for those with good karmic rewards. The more that we enjoy in an environment of enjoyment, the more that we tend to become greedy because we want to enjoy that. Greed has a more positive outlook of life because the purpose is to enjoy. Whereas anger tends to see life very dark, very disagreeable view of life. Anger wants to destroy. Greed wants to maintain it so they can enjoy. So they're two separate ends of the spectrum. But anger is unskillful and it can make a person ugly. Well, at least it will make a person unattractive. Right? When we're angry, we're showing our explosive energy. People shy away from us. They don't want to be around us because we're being harmful, we're being poisonous to them. And being angry is being at a subhuman level, more of a demonic part of state of being. That's why anger is poison.